Thank you. Well, good morning and welcome. I hope that everyone is enjoying reunion and homecoming weekend thus far. There's still more exciting things to come. And one of them is this morning, because this morning we have 4 alumni with us who have risen to crucial positions within venerable organizations that play major roles in our economy and globally, and have helped to keep those organizations on the leading edge. Now with them, we will consider our theme for this year: criticality, incisiveness, creativity. Our theme comes out of the colloquy theme, around which we build discussion with our honorands, our honorary degree candidates at commencement. And we continue the discussion into the next academic year. Criticality, of course, has 2 meanings. It is the moment when a nuclear reaction becomes self-sustaining. But it also refers, it's not what we're going to talk about this morning. I could, but you know, I thought we wouldn't. And more to our point this morning, it also refers to a state of extreme importance when everything is at stake. As we look at the world today, criticality describes our current moment very well. There is a potentially dangerous instability in the global order as leaders of our own country and North Korea exchange, some would say, threats, as Russian interference in our last presidential election is investigated, and as the United Kingdom leaves the European Union in the midst of a refugee crisis. We've just experienced a series of devastating hurricanes in the south, in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands and elsewhere, the earthquakes in Mexico, the ongoing wildfires in California, and recently the theft of vast amounts of sensitive personal information at the credit bureau Equifax that is essentially affecting, when you think about it, nearly half of the United States population. Now, beneath these current events, very complex global challenges are causing tectonic shifts, including humanity's need to secure sufficient supplies of food, fresh water, and energy for an expanding global population, the concomitant need to mitigate climate change and to build sustainable infrastructure, and the battle to improve human health and to combat diseases, including those that are new, at least new to us, and poorly understood, and the difficulty of ensuring national and global security given the rise of non-state actors, new threats from cyberspace and from cyber-physical systems, and new tensions among old allies. These challenges clearly are linked, with one influencing the other, and because of the interconnectedness of our systems and societies, a triggering event anywhere in the world can create intersecting vulnerabilities with cascading consequences. At the same time, new tools of connection, analysis, and discovery in fields such as genomics and computation offer us tremendous opportunities to better understand our world and to improve lives on a grand scale. So while we are increasingly likely to face moments of criticality in our lives and careers, we also are likely to address them with information, hitherto inaccessible, with that information and with intelligence, with brilliant collaborators from across the globe and with aplomb. Now at Rensselaer, we educate our students to expect volatility and change and to spot the chances for progress within the moments of upheaval by emphasizing the importance of intellectual agility, multicultural sophistication, and a global view. And as a university, and some of you may be hearing these words for the first time, we organize ourselves within a paradigm we term the new Polytechnic, in which we embrace our roots as a Polytechnic, as we educate our students in the foundational elements of their fields and draw from those fields, as we serve as a great crossroads for talented people from across generations and geographies, working together to address great challenges and great opportunities, and to be transformative in the world by making use of the new tools and technologies at our disposal. And today we welcome to this crossroads 4 alumni of Rensselaer who have tackled moments of criticality with incisiveness and creativity. And so you're in for a treat this morning. So now allow me to introduce our guests. Our first guest graduated from Rensselaer with a Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry in 1978 and earned her Juris Doctor from Brooklyn Law School in 1981. As a number of distinguished Rensselaer graduates have done, she used her early grounding in science as a foundation for the practice of patent law, joining Union Carbide Corporation in 1981. She joined Hughes Aircraft Company in 1984, rising there to become the first minority woman chief patent counsel of a Fortune 500 company and the first minority woman vice president at Hughes. Now, when the Boeing company, the world's leading aerospace company, acquired Hughes in December of 2000, she became a member of the Boeing legal team and soon was asked to serve as vice president of human resources for the Boeing defense and space businesses, a $30 billion unit. Because of her leadership at a challenging time for her industry and company, she was then asked to take on the role of vice president and assistant general counsel, heading the legal staff for defense and space. In 2007, she was asked to serve as senior vice president of the Office of Internal Governance for the entire Boeing company and to join the executive council. Now, in that role, she was responsible for the management and oversight of compliance, internal audit, ethics and business conduct, and global trade controls, which included all import and export activities. Now, she retired from this position in June of 2014. Among many accolades, she received the 2011 Pioneer Award from Black Engineer of the Year Conference, the National Asian Pacific American Corporate Achievement Award from the Organization of Chinese Americans, and the Legal Defense and Education Fund Award, which recognized her as one of the 30 most powerful women in business in 2001. Now, we're extremely fortunate here at Rensselaer to access her wise counsel on a regular basis. She joined our Board of Trustees in 2011 and became its vice chair at the beginning of this year, 2017. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Ms. Wanda Benson Bo. Thank you, dear. Good to see you. Our next guest earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Computer Science from Rensselaer in 1987 and a Master of Science in Management Engineering in 1992. She started her career at the Digital Equipment Corporation and then spent nearly 15 years in leadership positions at General Electric, ultimately serving as the Chief Information Officer of GE Silicones. She then served in increasingly senior Chief Information Officer roles at the Flowserve Corporation, Energy Future Holdings Corporation, and Rogers Communications. She joined United Continental Holdings, the parent company of United Airlines, in 2014 as Executive Vice President and Chief Information Officer. Earlier this year, she was named Executive Vice President for Technology and Chief Digital Officer, and her responsibilities expanded to include all digital distribution for United, including United.com and the award-winning United mobile app. Among many accolades, she was named to Crain's Chicago Business 2016 Tech 50, which recognizes the top technology talent in Chicago. This year, she was named CIO of the Year by the Chicago CIO Association. Now, here at Rensselaer, we are grateful for her support as a trustee of the Rensselaer Alumni Association, and we're looking for even greater contributions from her in the future. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Ms. Linda Jojo.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it, too.
Great. Our next guest received her undergraduate degree in mathematics from St. John's University before earning her Master of Science degree in Operations Research and Statistics from Rensselaer in 1975. She then went on to a distinguished 39-year career with IBM, holding numerous senior leadership positions, including as general manager of the mainframe division during the 1990s, when she helped to reinvent the S390 products for open systems computing and for the rise of the internet. She also was senior vice president and group executive of the IBM Storage Systems Group, taking IBM from 5th place in the storage market share to 2nd in just 2 years. She capped her career at IBM as Senior Vice President of Enterprise Transformation, responsible for IBM's internal transformation into a fully globally integrated enterprise. She retired from IBM in 2014 and currently is an operating executive for the Carlyle Group, a leading alternative asset manager. Our guest is a member of the Women in Technology International Hall of Fame and the National Academy of Engineering. She has been named one of the 50 most influential women in business by Fortune magazine. She is co-author of the 2006 book, Let Go to Grow, which considers ways that companies can use collaboration, innovation, and increased productivity to escape the pressures of commoditization in a global marketplace and to achieve long-term growth. She holds an honorary doctorate in commercial science from St. John's University. She is a trustee emerita of Rensselaer after serving as an active trustee for 10 years. Her advice and her dynamic example have helped Rensselaer to anticipate change and to create a new paradigm for the technological research university in the 21st century. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Ms. Linda Sanford. Thank you. Nice to see you. Thank you. Our next guest earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Management Engineering from Rensselaer in 1990 and an Executive Master of Business Administration degree in 1998. She started her now 26-year career with the United States Postal Service in 1991 in the Albany district, where she served as an industrial engineer and manager for remote encoding operations. After a number of other roles, she rose to Vice President of Capital Metro Area Operations in 2013. In this position, she was responsible for overseeing operations throughout the 8 districts of Atlanta, Baltimore, the capital, Greater South Carolina, Greensboro, Mid-Carolinas, Northern Virginia, and Richmond. Good grief. And an area that encompassed nearly 16 million customers and over 63,000 employees. In April of 2016, our guest was named Chief Information Officer and Executive Vice President of the United States Postal Service. She leads the efforts across the Postal Service to drive innovation with enterprise analytics, business insights, mail intelligence, engineering systems, information security, and payment technology. Whew. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Ms. Kristen Ann Seaver.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you. And so we begin. So welcome. So the theme of our talk today, criticality, incisiveness, creativity, is about making excellent decisions at moments of truth. Now in business, the phrase enterprise risk is used to describe true criticality. Now, I know that several of you have had firsthand experience with enterprise risk when your decisions help to determine the ultimate survival of your organization. So let us begin with you, Ms. Denson-Low, AKA Wanda. But I think after this, it's Wanda, it's Linda, it's Kristen, and it's Shirley. It's the girls' show this morning. So let us begin with you, Wanda, because of the nature of your career. You've helped your employers to identify and avoid many enterprise risks and to recover from those they did not avoid. Now, in the aerospace industry, the products being sold are complex, sensitive, some of them military, while the customer base spans many nations. So clearly the potential for compliance error is particularly high. And the penalties, though, for such an error can be particularly deep and steep. So please tell us how you dealt with this and how do you build resilience vis-a-vis compliance risk into your employers' cultures?
I think what's interesting is I came into the Office of Internal Governance after a particularly difficult period for Boeing. For those of you who are my age, you may remember reading in the newspapers some issues around the very first tanker program and some very public missteps by some very senior Boeing executives. And so the Office of Internal Governance, which is a name that primarily only Boeing uses, was meant as a first step to kind of changing how the internal Boeing company really thought about its culture and thought about compliance. And so at that time, we were under an administrative agreement, and my predecessor pulled together the Office of Internal Governance, which had compliance, ethics, internal audit, which is a little unusual given there were 150 internal auditors reporting to me, enterprise risk management, ethics. And when I took over, we were under an administrative agreement, and when I had a conversation with my CEO, he said to me, we really need to figure out a way to change the dynamic of how we deal with compliance, how we deal with ethics in our organization. And he said, I want you to think differently. RPI grad, thinking differently. And I think one of the things that I tried to do when I took over this role was really to kind of change the headset about what compliance was and what ethics was. And at that time, though there was ethics training, the government subsequently, as a result of Boeing, changed a lot of the federal government contracting rules to require ethics training, whereas that had not previously been a requirement. Boeing is a large-scale systems integrator. 150,000 employees worldwide, 42 states, 32 foreign countries, $96 billion a year in revenue. Very big, very vast. And so trying to change the mindset of that many people had to take a lot of thought. And as I sat down with my team to really talk about it, you build resilience to recover from a misstep. And we had a very public one. And so the thing was not to kind of go in the corner and cover it up, but really to look inward for a bit and examine ourselves. And so we started a dialogue with the employees, with the executives. And the executives, from the chairman on down, became the facilitators and the teachers in this discussion. We didn't do the typical ethics training where you sit down with maybe a lawyer who tells you the legal pros and cons. Why didn't we do that? Because what happens is, if you think about it, whether you're doing large-scale programs or even this particular issue, people tend to plan for everything to go right. And guess what happens in life? Does everything ever go right all the time? And so what we said as a company was to really recover from this. What we couldn't do was, quote, make ourselves the most ethical company in the world. That's impossible, because we're made of human beings and human beings make mistakes. But what we could do was put a real focus on doing the right thing the first time. But in those instances when things do go wrong, because we're human, it really is the true test of the company to show that when things do go wrong, how the company responds, and that they have to respond appropriately, ethically, and that is something we try to do as the Boeing company. And so our training really was the CEO. We, believe it or not, rented arenas in certain locations. So imagine an arena in St. Louis filled with 30,000 Boeing people. And the person who was the head of that particular facility actually getting up and engaging in a dialogue with the workforce for several hours about what happened, what went wrong, and how we were going to fix it. And it resulted in a really big change in culture. Surprisingly, one of the things we also did, we had an ethics website. That's not unusual. But what we did, and this is going back more than 10, 13, 14 years, we started having ethics reports, only accessible internally by employees, where we changed some of the names, but we let employees see real circumstances of when there were missteps, how they were dealt with. And believe it or not, since I have several CIOs here, they know you can measure hits to the website. We were the most popular website in the company. We were hit millions of times a day, and it could only be accessed by employees. And so we found a way to take something that was hidden and closeted, because no one likes to admit when they make a mistake, and have it become an open dialogue about what we can do when we do make mistakes. And that taught us as a company how to be resilient. And really, we turned lemons into lemonade. We became a world-class company for compliance. As DOD told us subsequently, a few years later, in export compliance and many other areas where we had had some very public missteps. So I think thinking differently, shedding light on a subject, and really having active engagement. And I commend my chairman, because he was actually streaming live, teaching thousands of employees about ethics and about compliance. And I think it took someone with a lot of courage to stand up as the leader of a 150,000 person company and to really talk about what went wrong, how we were going to fix it, and what we needed to do right going forward.
Well, Linda J., Wanda's talked about people plan for success, but then, I've talked about with a triggering incident how with interconnectedness there can be intersecting vulnerabilities. with cascading consequences. And so in the last few years, we have seen several airlines cancel thousands of flights because of a single point of failure in their information technology systems. And when one considers how many systems are automated in air travel, everything from the scheduling of flights and crews to reservations to checking in, to the routing of bags, to the routing and tracking of flights, to the monitoring of engine performance, and how essential air transport is to so many other systems, the possibility for chaos seems large indeed. So tell us about your most critical moment at United and how you saw your way through it.
Sure. Well, thank you, Dr. Shirley. Thank you.
My friends call me Dr. Shirley.
There you go. Certainly airlines have a really unique place for everybody. By the time you have decided to book a ticket and bought a ticket, you really want to get where you're going. It can be an important business meeting. It can be a family vacation. It can be a 30th college reunion, like I flew yesterday. And so if those plans disrupt, it's a really, really personal, important thing. And what's happened in the airline industry is just how fast technology has just become very, very core to how we do it all. It really wasn't that long ago that you were all going to the lobby, talking to somebody, getting this piece of paper called a boarding pass, and going on and getting on the flight. And maybe those are the only times you interacted with the airline. Now you're searching for the best fare, you're comparison shopping, you buy the ticket, you pick a seat, you submit your upgrade, you check if your upgrade went through, you check if a better seat is there. Somewhere along the way we tell you it's time to check in, so you check in, you check your upgrade again, you check for a better seat again, you maybe put yourself on standby. And so the number of times that customers are interacting with us it's just exponential and going higher. We're doing the same thing with our employees. They used to stand behind these big monstrous screens and bang away like crazy. And now they have iPhones and iPads, and we are pushing more and more information to them. Well, the problem is when something goes wrong, it can stop literally everything. And when I joined United Airlines in 2014, one of the first conversations I had with the CEO was, he says, Linda, there's a lot of things you have to do, but the most important thing you have to do is change that third paragraph in every single article about United Airlines, which was about a very difficult integration that United and Continental had in 2012 that disrupted.
I was a Continental customer.
Yeah, I know. and you're now a very good United customer, so thank you. And thank you to all of you that fly us. And so it's really, and so that was a really big issue. But as you mentioned, right now, around 450 of our 700 airplanes are in the air. We'll carry 500,000 people today. We'll check in 300,000 bags. About 12,000 pilots, 24,000 flight attendants will be in various stages of the cruise around. So there's a lot of complexity. But I didn't forget the question.
I wasn't worried
I had
about
to say it. When you say what is the most critical, I have to point to July 8th, 2015. So it was about 6 months after I joined the company. It happened to be the day after my 25th wedding anniversary. I was in Alaska and had celebrated the night before with my husband, and along the way had turned my phone off. It's a bad idea for a CIO. No matter where you are. It was literally the first days I had taken off since joining the company. And so I got up that morning and I went to the gym because I had overindulged the night before. And I'm working out, and my husband comes streaking in, and he's got my phone out. And he said, Linda, there's something wrong. And that morning, we had a major outage. It caused a ground stop, which is like the worst thing you can do, which means that all planes, once they land, cannot take off again until the problem is fixed. That is immediately picked up, and the reason why he was telling me this was that it was on CNN. So That was definitely, I could pick many, but that would be the one. And I guess the good news, bad news is by the time I figured it out, I heard about it, it was all over. We were back up. We weren't back to normal, but the problem had been found and solved, which is, we can talk about later about how that happened. And so I start returning the 60 or so voicemail messages that I had. They were multiples from my boss and from a few others. You know, we talked about it, and then I went back to work. And I got in, and everybody is walking on eggshells. Like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen to Linda? What's she gonna do? And what I realized is this was a really unique opportunity. The CEO and I had an unwritten, we gotta get that third paragraph going. Of course, now it's up a couple paragraphs to the top. But this now became a massive call to action. A call to action to the IT team, but more importantly, a call to action to the rest of the organization that we have to change something. And without going into all the details, since then we've changed everything. We've changed how we make changes. We've added a lot of intelligent monitoring so that we can predict things before they happen. And we also recognized that things are gonna happen. With all those moving parts, all you know is that there's something wrong right now. I mean, there is something wrong right now somewhere in United. There's a plane delayed, there may be a system with an issue, and it's how you recover. And we took pride in how well we recover, to the point where we've had, not for the same root cause, but we've had similar situations since then, and none of you know. And there was one 3 nights ago. My husband knows, my phone went off. That you don't know because of how we have actually turned it around. And you take an opportunity like that to galvanize and go faster than you would have before.
Oh.
I have more, but we only, I only picked one.
Wow. So Linda S., you know that things go wrong, but they can also go wrong in almost existential ways for big companies. And, you know, being on the board of IBM and, you know, having observed you, I know that you have dealt with moments of criticality and you've been a change agent and to turn things around. So I want to go back a bit to the 1990s and have you tell us a little bit about, to the extent you can, about how dire things were at IBM in the 1990s and the decisions that you made and had to make in turning things around in the mainframe division. And did the fact that the company, I have to add this, was so on edge empower you, or did it frighten you?
Well, you were right, Shirley. I mean, it was, we all, I think, referred to it as do or die time. We had hit the proverbial brick wall in the early 90s. If you remember, I'm actually older than you, Wanda, so, but, you know, we were the dinosaur on the cover of Fortune magazine, you know, on its way to extinction. And it was dire. It was very, very dire. And, you know, at the time, you know, we were all wrestling with what do we do, how do we do it? We were more than mainframe, but mainframe was the core of the IBM company. I was actually working on, you know, copiers and printers and networks at the time. And at that point, we had brought in a new chairman and CEO from the outside, Lou Gerstner, and he had asked me to help reinvent the mainframe. And so here was somebody working on copiers and printers coming into mainframe, which was God's land in the IBM company. So one of the first things that, you know, we looked at was what has happened out there in the marketplace? You know, because we were so successful for so long, and then all of a sudden, we just hit this wall. And so one of the first things I did was just go out and speak with customers, listen to them. I would spend Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because I was new to this whole world, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, listening to clients, saying, first and foremost, I'm sorry, because we needed to keep them hanging in there with us. They were, you know, our heart and soul. And then said, talk to me. What did we miss? What happened? There was a whole new competitive landscape out there. We had more fleet of foot, you know, lower cost competitors who were all coming at us. We also had a world where, you know, things were opening up. We were very proprietary. And the world was opening up more and more to, you know, open interfaces and sharing a little bit earlier. And that's what clients needed. That's what they were looking for. But we had lost our way at that point. But the good news is they were still willing to talk with us. We were their infrastructure. I mean, you know, we were the infrastructure that sent, you know, people to the moon, you know, that built the airline reservation systems. And so we needed to completely reinvent ourselves here. And then every Friday, I would bring the team together. We were all in Poughkeepsie at that point. Brought them all together and said, here's what I heard this week. Now, what are we going to do about it? So it didn't start from, you know, our inside going out. It was from the outside going in. And that was an eye-opener for all of us to really recognize that we did lose our way and we needed to be more, you know, cognizant of what was happening in the world around us from a client point of view, from a competitive point of view, and the market in general there. And then, you know, our team started actually working on building those relationships with clients. You know, the senior technical leaders all had to have at least one client that they would continuously interface with and interact with. So they were getting real-time feedback on what was needed there. Clients would come and speak to our teams so that we were hearing again from us. Just reinforcing the importance of listening to the market, to the client, to have that influence all the great invention and innovation we could bring into the world there. I think the other thing that was very, very crucial at that point in time was that we needed to ensure that, you know, this was not a one-time, you know, fix it and you keep going again. The world was changing to the point where we were going to constantly be needing to reinvent ourselves. And that, you know, that is a cultural change. That is a cultural change. It's not just the technology you can continuously reinvent, but how do you get the people who are building with this technology to continuously reinvent that themselves as well? And so I believe a lot of what is required there is constant communication. I was relating a lot, Wanda, to what you were talking about. Constant communication with your people. Getting the customer point of view, explaining what our new strategy is, why we need this new strategy, what is changing in the world around us. And then what I call walking the floor. I mean, I did this from day one at IBM, and I loved it, did it all throughout my career, is walk the manufacturing floor, walk the laboratory, walk the offices, just to get a sense of, are people understanding it? Are they worried? Are they scared? You know, do they really have the input they need? Because at the end of the day, they are the people who are going to make the change happen. They're going to make it happen. So you need to not just empower them, but you need to, you know, unleash them. But they need to have all the facts and all the information there. It was, I mean, to this day, that team and I are just very, very close. We call it through hell and back, but we learned so much. And the good news is they have constantly reinvented themselves. And we're over 50 years old now and just came out with a brand new mainframe recently. And oh, thank you. But, you know, sometimes, you know, when I always say when all ship, you know, when all the tides are rising, it's easy, you know, to kind of go along with that tide rising. Where you really learn is when you do hit some of those, you know, hard brick walls. And the question is, you can't just fall apart. How do you take it, like you both said, learn from it, and then move forward?
Now, speaking of navigating churning waters and reinvention, Kristen, let me start this way. Many people are not aware that the United States Postal Service, in fact, is a self-supporting $70 billion enterprise. It's a business that does not rely on taxpayer dollars. Yet it exists within a frame where it's subject to statutory and regulatory limitations that limit its financial flexibility. For example, unlike your competitors, and I am on the board of one of them, in the package, that's it, and that's part of reinvention, I think. But you have a responsibility for the last mile, for delivering mail and packages universally to 156 million addresses, no matter how remote or unprofitable the route. So can you tell us about the role that what you do plays in keeping the USPS, as we like to call it, financially viable?
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and I'm certainly pleased to talk about the Postal Service. One other aspect of the Postal Service is we're mandated to provide universal, affordable service.
Right.
That's, as Shirley mentioned, the last mile. And we take that on proudly. That's our history. That's who we are. But over time, what's happened with the Postal Service is similar to the other agencies. We've become, technology drives our ability now to do our core mission. 20 years ago, network outage, technology issues, the mail could still be sorted, money could still be collected, and the mail could be delivered. Today, not so. So my first fundamental responsibility is to ensure that the systems that the Postal Service relies on are available. We also had incidents and issues, and it was a very moment of criticality and clarity for me that any type of sustained outage, and our systems are so interdependent, quickly rises to a continuity of operations issue for the United States Postal Service. That wasn't the most comfortable moment of my career when we started to think about that. The other thing is, the Postal Service is a mission essential function of government, even though we're self-funded. And our job is to be out delivering mail. So one, availability, so just like postal operations and all the other organizations, 24/7, 365. Secondly, in an exciting world of digital, which you might find it interesting to have somebody from the post office say, that's exciting, there's all these opportunities to, on the foundation of mail, to increase connections with our customers and increase connections between businesses and receivers and sellers and people who want to buy things, people who need things, medicines. And there's a large digital component to that now. One of the learnings I've had is that there is no product, physical product anymore, that the data and information around that product for the consumer is not as important. And we take that with the Postal Service. So how can we leverage our digital infrastructure to enhance our products, to keep mail relevant, to ensure that we continue to buy in the nation? And then the third aspect that I'm really excited about, which again can be dangerous waters, is we have a unique opportunity to leverage one of the largest physical infrastructures in the country and one of the largest digital infrastructures that we have built out to be able to deliver that mail and provide that universal service efficiently. But there is a tremendous amount of value on that digital infrastructure and the opportunities that the Postal Service could use to provide other products and services that aren't related to mail. Now I have to say, based on your first comments, whether we have the authority or under regulation can do that, but in my role and with the team that I support, our job is to make that opportunity visible and make sure that people understand how important it is for the long-term financial viability of the Postal Service, that we can continue our universal service obligation. So we have to find a way to make it happen.
Well, I would also just add that, the work that you do and have done vis-a-vis technology and how it gets integrated and to make that work is also what enables the partnerships with the private nominal competitors, because one has to be able to have that transfer from one system to another.
Absolutely.
And have it work. So, given, who we all are, and given we all sit in our own way at the bleeding edge of technology, as we consider enterprise risk, a number of Silicon Valley companies are being scrutinized for their failure to offer equal opportunities and equal pay to women. And other Silicon Valley CEOs, venture capitalists, and investment group heads, in fact, have resigned, as we all know, recently over allegations of sexual harassment in various levels in their organizations. So this is perhaps a question I don't need to ask you, but I shall. Are you shocked to hear or read about these stories at some of the most innovative companies in the world? We'll just do this as a fast answer.
Absolutely not.
No way.
No?
I somewhat am. And I just, real quickly, it's just, I'm very fortunate, but that hasn't been my experience at the United States Postal Service. We follow the leadership of the first female Postmaster General, Megan Brennan. My experience has been people look for what you can bring to the table, not who you are. And I think that's a great strength of the United States Postal Service. So I find it somewhat perplexing, to be honest with you, which I know I'm fortunate to be in that situation.
Well, perhaps it should be perplexing because, it's about not really allowing and accessing the complete talent pool. But speaking about that and about those who sometimes are treated and are, in fact, outsiders, Linda S., you did reinvent the mainframe business at IBM, which conventional wisdom had said was going under. But you did it under who is now a business legend, Lou Gerstner. And he was, in fact, the first CEO IBM had, in fact, hired from outside its own ranks. And so maybe, too, in a way, in the background to the question that I just posed, how important was this outsider quality, this different perspective, to turning around the fortunes of IBM at that point?
I think at that point in time, it was very, very important. He brought a whole new perspective. And he was very, very fact-based, and making sure the facts were on the table, not the emotions. And it really, I think, shook us all up, to what he needed to do to say, let's look at what's happening in the world there. And a few things that I remember very, 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 by the way, as I said earlier, the fact that I had the great opportunity to come and lead that transformation, talk about the other question you asked. Here I was, working on other, not major products in IBM and then put into that role. So he clearly, demonstrated to me and a lot of other women the importance of getting diverse opinions and diverse perspectives out there. But a couple of things that he did early on that just, I never forgot. Number one, this thought about the client first. And we all had to write. We had to go out and speak to clients. We all had to go write a report that he then had to read and came back to us with. So it was very, very, hardcore actions that we had to take, not just sit there and say, yes, 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 but show me. And it was what was needed because we thought we knew what the clients wanted. And obviously we didn't. Or we misread it. So just going out to the client, having those conversations, and then writing up what we heard so we could have a discussion. Now, by the way, when we handed it in, it was always prose, not, PowerPoints. Not PowerPoints, because you can mean a lot of different things with bullets, right? We had to write it in prose. He would then correct it, by the way, sentence structure, capitalization.
I relate to that.
Literally. I remember, oh boy.
No, but don't ask anybody sitting on the front row here.
Oh, today. But again, it made you think. It made you think about what did I really hear, and then what am I going to do about it? And so he kind of brought us back to, I call it some of the basics that you should never, ever forget. Now, it informed then what we had to do in terms of a new strategy to reinvent ourselves to keep that mainframe growing. But the last thing that was so impactful for me, and I know many, many people, but he stuck to our core values. He knew everything else had to change, what products, how we distribute, and where we go, and the approach. But the core values of what makes IBM, IBM, and what makes IBMers, IBMers, they were paramount. And he reminded us of those values. And that we need to be really resilient and faithful to those values. And that informed everything we did there. So he was absolutely the perfect person at the time.
Well, I know you spent as much as 80% of your time listening to clients. Linda J., I know you have to spend a lot of time listening to your customers. Mm-hmm. You have an organization that is very complex, but is very mission-driven. And, having worked at one point in my career for AT&T, was focused on universal service, people take those missions very seriously, and it's hard. And then you talked about how your CEO literally carried and articulated values and talked to tens of thousands of employees at a time. But there's another way that different perspectives come into play, and that is what a given individual brings by virtue of her own career experience. So Linda J., you've worked in a number of different industries, from advanced materials to pumps to energy to wireless and cable communications and media, using actually technology to achieve the strategic aims of very different businesses. So how would you say that United, which has quadrupled its IT investments under your leadership, how has United benefited from that range in your own career?
Yeah. One of the things about me is just that I love to learn and I love to solve problems. And sometimes not always in that order, sometimes just all, but so I just love learning about new industries. That's one of the reasons that I got a computer science degree here and stayed in technology throughout my career, was for that reason. And the other is I learned that you can actually very quickly pull commonalities from one industry to another and bring perspectives that those that have been in the industry for a long time don't necessarily have. I find, especially when I'm newer in the job, I ask a lot of questions, and you find out that you're asking questions that a lot of people that are in the room and maybe in the industry for a long time don't really know the answer to either, or have different perspectives on what the answer is. And so I found that that's the value I can bring, is that diversity of thought, that diversity of experiences tied together with the things that are always the same. First of all of our businesses have people in them. In the case, and you have to figure out how to be a sustainable business. In public companies, it's about profit, but there's a sustainability aspect to it. And so when you figure out what those two things are and the keys to that, and then how can you apply technology to that mission, that's what I feel that I brought.
Well, Wanda, you've had an interesting way that you, by definition, had different positions and developed different perspectives. You were in a company acquired by another company, and typically the acquiring company, quote unquote, sets the culture. So you ended up having to adapt. You were a lawyer, but you managed a vast human resources organization. So tell us a little bit about, how those different experiences shaped your leadership style.
I think, and there are a couple of lawyers in the audience that I know, so exception. But I think lawyers in general have kind of, I would say, fairly kind of black-white view of the world, though usually when you have a lawyer, you're typically arguing in the gray, because obviously lawyers have the ability to argue both sides. I think where it becomes tricky when you move into a different position that's not law, lawyers tend to get stuck in that law. Well, here are the rules. Well, guess what? People don't always follow the rules. And business, I think, requires a flexibility. Not that I'm saying we break the law, that's not what I'm saying. But a flexibility to think about, rather than, no, you can't do this, here's what you can do and meet all the laws and the legal requirements. And I think that, you know, being in HR was just a mind-blowing experience for me. You know, you're dealing with people in labor unions, you're dealing with strikes. We have a big labor union workforce. You're dealing with engineers who also have a union in certain facilities in parts of the country. So it was a mind-blowing experience for me, and I think it opened the aperture of things that I'm able to consider in making a decision. And I think often, particularly as senior executives in a large organization, you forget about unintended consequences of actions that you take. You assume, well, yes, this is the right fiscal decision, and you may think about people issues, but there are many other unintended consequences. And I think particularly that was something that HR role really made me think about. And so my decisions really always looked at from that point on what were going to be the unintended consequences. And we would sit as we were making rules that would go across the Boeing company globally and domestically. How were people going to react? How would they respond? How would executives respond? How would subcontractors and other partners respond? Because we were really changing the culture and changing behavior. And so I think having that breadth to your experience, and I think I was one of the few lawyers who, I'd been an intellectual property lawyer, I had kind of changed that focus and became someone who understood government contracts and mergers and acquisitions. I did huge M&A work back in the mid-90s. The sale of Hughes's defense business to Raytheon at that time was one of the largest transactions, and we were able to do it tax-free. They subsequently changed the law, so no company could do that again. But I was part of that legal team that helped engineer that strategy. And so I think I've always thought more broadly, and that really enabled me to adapt to some very different positions that I've had within the company.
So I want to leave a little time for a few questions from the audience, but given this panel, I think we do have to talk about this. You know, inherent in what we're talking about vis-a-vis technology and its role with how you manage global enterprises and link around the world, we have to talk about data cybersecurity. It's linked to enterprise security and even global security. And so let me ask the question this way. I'm going to kind of tilt it to Kristen, but I want any of you to be able to respond. And I'm going to embed a question that's probably more tilted, Linda J, to you, but I want any of you to respond, and then we're going to open it to the audience for a few minutes. You know, as you know, data protection rules have been unified and strengthened in the European Union with the goal of providing individuals greater control over the storage and use of their personal data. And here in the United States, our privacy laws are a bit spottier, and some would say weaker. And many people particularly are upset about the Equifax breach, which again has exposed the personal information, probably of all of us, of over 145 million people. If you look at the number of adults in this country, surely it affects us. Because they did not volunteer their data to Equifax, and indeed had no information over whether Equifax collected it. The Postal Service, similarly embedded in our daily lives, has information about 156 million delivery addresses, about the same number. So let me just start with you, but let me kind of give, before you start, kind of fold in things that Linda J. relates to you. Now, IBM is in the middle of this because it has data and people's data and Boeing. So, Linda J., your databases at United contain equally sensitive personal information, including where people are going, right? And the cyber physical systems, which is a big deal, I think, that we are just now beginning to think about, involved in air travel, mean that physical damage can potentially be caused remotely. And so we don't talk about it much in the public, nor should we at a certain level, but it's there. So how does one tackle these infinite points of vulnerability, all this information about people and what they're doing, where they live, and frankly, in these days of Google, how they live, where they're going, okay, how they get there, how we move and store their data. Any and all of you, it's open for you.
I'll start with just a couple of quick things. So the Postal Service, even before the explosion of the digital world, has always been held to account for the privacy, of our customers.
Right.
The address was considered the key to the kingdom many, many years ago. So we take that very seriously. We comply with our regulations, but it's also part of our brand as one of the most trusted government agencies. And we kind of have a saying in the Postal Service that the sanctity of the mail holds true in both the physical world and the digital world.
Oh, so I wish.
And or it needs to. So for us, it's really about, it's both about privacy and then it's about information security. And privacy is more for us about responsibility and brand and upholding our job. And information security for us is more about resiliency, readiness, controls, disciplines around the things we need to do to ensure that we can uphold the privacy end of the bargain.
Got it.
That's a pretty simple answer, but it's a complex area. And the only other thing I would say to it, Shirley, is that it's moved from being something you do after the fact to it's got to be in the conversation with the major stakeholders, legal operations, right up front in everything we do.
Absolutely.
Well, from an airline perspective, what I can tell you is, though, we compete fiercely with American, Delta, Southwest, and to a lesser extent, the carriers from other countries. But we do not compete at all on safety or cybersecurity. So safety has been embedded and with Boeing and with other manufacturers in terms of how do we always make our aircraft and airline travel more safe, and there's lots of data about how safe that really is. We are modeling that on cybersecurity. So there's a very active community of the chief information security officers of all the airlines, the manufacturers, Boeing, Airbus, Bombardier, but also all the manufacturers of all the equipment that runs on the airlines, and also the organizations like IBM that actually support all of this. We regularly share best practices, and then probably most importantly, when there is a crisis, there is an immediate connection. So not to relive that awful first question you asked me, but that was a question in the middle of that whole issue was, is this a cyber issue? And one of the calls was due to a call from the government to ask if this was some type of a cyber issue. And we also work very closely with those agencies as well. I have clearance just for the reason to go in and get briefed on the kinds of things that are actually happening all the time. So that said, I'm paranoid as heck.
I hear you. Wanda, Linda?
Well, I'll say from the Boeing perspective, one, obviously, we're a huge federal contractor. On the commercial side, we have subs, and then from a very practical standpoint, we have a lot of employees whose information has to be protected. And one of the things I think Boeing does well is integrate across the organization. Now, some parts integrate better and play nicer with other parts from time to time. But on cybersecurity, what's interesting is we come together, CFOs, CIOs, lawyers, compliance, security, HR, to work the problem together. Our CIO, when I last retired, we have a constant scan of our systems. And as of the date I retired, someone tried to penetrate our systems something like 487,000 times a day. I'm sure it is. We monitor not just penetrations or attempted penetrations, but we look at, our employees downloading large chunks of information, and that will trigger something within security investigations, which at that time also reported to me, where we would then do an investigation. Why is this employee downloading reams of information? And we can kind of tell, what it is and so on. And so I think this is
where artificial intelligence can help you.
And it is.
Yeah,
absolutely.
definitely. It's a huge problem that I think unfortunately is only going to get worse. And the compliance piece of it, our folks were so well trained, and I'm going to tell maybe funny story about HR folks who, if you can think about it, had salary information, social security numbers of employees. Initially, this is going back probably 10 years plus, HR managers used to be able to download from the mainframe information about employees and have it on their laptop to work at home. So there was a huge problem with theft of laptops in airports and things like that. And so we really put a focus on it in compliance. And if you can imagine someone who was a vice president at Boeing, literally petrified to put his laptop in the trunk of our car, in his car, because we were taught you can never leave your laptop unattended. It had to be locked in a safe. You couldn't lock it in your trunk. And so you'd go to a Boeing business meeting and everybody would have their laptop petrified to let it out of their sight, because there would be huge ramifications for theft of the laptop with confidential information on it. And so part of what I tried to do was say, I'm tired of seeing all these people come to meetings with their laptop because they're terrified. And I said, we have to figure out a way to either say to employees, okay, this information, you can't download it onto your laptop. You have to keep it on whatever that mainframe server secure at work and work on it there. You can't take it home, so that you avoid this issue of people being terrified to put their laptop in their trunk. And what we tried to do was make it much more practical, but the problem is obviously continuing. You've got ransomware, you've got all these things going on.
Well, that's why, Linda, I'm gonna give you the last word on this, because IBM, you hold people's data, you move it, you process it, you store it,
And all the things that the three women here have talked about are very, very important. Where I think the game changer could be here, because you're not going to stop this.
That's correct.
You're not. As smart as all of our engineers are, these people are equally smart, and they're going to keep finding a way. I think, and this is where I think artificial intelligence comes in. We're collecting this information now, so you're monitoring, what attacks are taking place. You're collecting the information. How do you start building these predictive models?
Exactly.
So you can start to see footprints in the sand. My friend John Kelly always says, footprints in the sand very early on that can say, uh-oh, that's going to happen, before any indication ever.
Creating, if you will, its own autoimmune system.
Exactly.
Right, exactly. I say it has to be designed like your body fights an infection.
Yep.
You have to assume the virus is coming.
Exactly.
But how you really deal with it is you come to places like Rensselaer Polytechnic.
Yes. Yes.
So I know there's a lot that's going on today. Let us bring up the lights and let me see if there are one or two questions from the audience that anyone might want to ask. Yes, please.
I think all of you had talked about the importance of...
Stand up, we could hear you. Project.
I think all of you had talked about the importance of the people-to-people interaction in your companies, and the way that technology is going with autonomous cars and artificial intelligence. A lot of that is created to create more efficiency, but it kind of takes out that human aspect. And I think if you had mentioned about human mistakes, but how important is still having that people-to-people interaction and having that ability to trust the human beings and make those mistakes to still be a part of your companies, even though we're creating these technologies.
Even more critical, I would say, to have that people-to-people interaction. And if you think about it, all the technology actually can free up some of your time from doing the manual kind of, grit stuff, so that you can have more value-based discussions and interactions with everybody. We have to, it should not shut it down. It's got to open it up.
Another question. Please. Yes, it is. But what, I just want people to shout, because by the time we
Yeah, by
have
the
people
time it gets
walk there, please. There was someone, was it you? Did I miss somebody?
Right there. Yes,
Okay.
gentlemen.
Stand up.
Yes.
And then there was a person here, I think.
I
Yes.
want to thank all the panelists because it was very enlightening and interesting to me. I actually worked at Boeing aircraft for a few years, but I was especially interested in Linda from IBM. Like you said that you came from lowly copiers. And I'm just curious, like, why did he select you? Obviously, he made the right decision, but why do you think that he selected you to do this awesome task?
I don't know. But I had, and I love copiers, and I love my typewriters and everything else. But when I was comparing, IBM was mainframe, right? But again, I think, I'm guessing what he might have said, but he was a new pair of eyes, and I think maybe I was a new pair of eyes. I didn't have the answers. I remember my very first meeting where I introduced myself to my team in an audience like this. And they're all sitting there like this. And one brave soul said, "What do you know about mainframes?" I said, "Honestly, nothing. But you know what? You're going to teach me, and together we're going to sort things out." And I think the fact that I didn't have all that knowledge, I was asking questions.
Yeah.
I love to ask questions. I love to interact. We'd be on the whiteboard drawing, is this what you mean parallel cisplex? So let's just how to, and we actually learned from each other. Because I think you said that, Linda, that lots of times the people didn't have the answer either. But when you start to engage, and I think, and we kind of talked around this, I call the word collaborative. Leadership in today's world has to be collaborative. And collaboration is not consensus. Some people will say that to me, and I say, oh, but I hate that word consensus. That means least common denominator. I'm not looking for that. But in a collaborative environment, first of all, you listen to everybody. You make sure everybody gets a chance to express their point of view, because a lot of folks aren't necessarily, going to jump into a conversation. Bring them into the conversation. And honestly, if you do right, 1 + 1 is greater than 2. And you get buy-in in the process. And that's the most stickiest thing you can do. But I'm guessing, this new pair of eyes didn't have a, perspective, and so can open up some new ideas here.
I think we have to get and have this be perhaps the last.
Good morning, I'm Sarah Stein, class of '04, and you are all phenomenal speakers. My question stems from a fact that I realize it's not every Saturday morning we get to be in front of such change agents. And I'm wondering, when you're in these chapters of great transformation, when you're getting up and going to work in the morning, do you feel like you're putting on that armor and you're going into battle? Or is it just another day of work and it takes these really special moments like today to look back and realize that those chapters have occurred?
I think the great question, yeah.
Great question.
I think the answer for me is yes to both questions. I think working for the Postal Service last 26 years, you know, I get up every morning, we have a little slogan, deliver the brand. You know, yeah, some days you do have to talk yourself into it, right? You're gonna do it, you're gonna bring it. But in addition, I think those periods of reflection, certainly the period to hear other people talk about critical moments, does allow you to put context around the body of your work and the organization you work for. So I think the answer for me is yes to both.
Mm-hmm. Linda?
To me, it was just exciting. I loved working with my colleagues. You know, I loved solving problems. So I didn't feel like I had to put armor on. I just, you know, it's a great day again. You know, what are we going to go figure out today, right?
Yeah. And I would say, wow, this is exciting for me too. I mean, this has just been a thrill to be part of this panel. It's special. But, you know, life is too short not to jump up and go into your day and make it the best day you can. And if you've had a couple of bad days in a row, I always say, well, you got to redefine what a bad day is then.
I would agree with all of my fellow panelists. I think that no one thinks necessarily that they're going to be a difference maker. You're out really trying to do the best possible job you can to inspire the people who work for you and work with you to do the right thing for the company. And I don't really think until you actually sit back and reflect in those few moments, which are difficult if you have a family and a high-powered job, you don't get a whole lot of those moments. But when you do, and you begin to reflect on what you did, because I also think that women tend to be super critical of themselves, you think, well, maybe I did something okay, and that, you know, that worked out better than, you know, we thought it was gonna be. And so I think those moments of reflection, I've gotten to do a lot more of that since I've been retired, are really good because it does help you not only think about what you've done, but more importantly, what you can do for others in the future, mentoring students, you know, helping other women who are in similar fields or other fields where sometimes we just need that extra push that you can really do whatever it is you want to do. You can balance that family and that high-powered job. It just means you're going to be tired all the time.
You know, there's a song that has a little line that says, if you can't be with the one you love, love the one you're with. And so, you know, if you somehow think that the situation you're in is not ideal, then you work to make it so.
Yeah,
That's right.
And,
That's right. Absolutely.
And we talked about human contact. Now that we have to go off to the football game. So thank all of you.